So, whatever happened to that super cool dinosaur western from 1969, The Valley of GWANGI? Let's find out. Movies,
music, and monsters.
Hey guys, Dan Monroe here talking about movies, music, and monsters. Oh man, The Valley of GWANGI. Definitely one of those super cool Saturday afternoon popcorn movies from the late 1960s, which always got a bad rap, and quite frankly, I'm not really sure why. I mean, come on, it's got James Franciscus in the lead, who is awesome. It's got brilliant stop-motion animation by the incomparable Ray Harryhausen. But for some reason, whenever I mention this movie to people of my age, I get one of two reactions. The first is, yeah, man, that's an awesome flick. And the second is, However, the backstory of this film is really kind of interesting, so grab your bucket of stale popcorn and let's dive in. Now, believe it or not, the original story of GWANGI was conceived by legendary special effects master Willis O'Brien. You know, the guy who created all the incredible special effects for the original 1933 King Kong. In this Willis O'Brien version, the story was called Valley of Misfits, where a group of rambunctious cowboys discover an ancient Allosaurus in the Grand Canyon. And other than the title being different, the rest of the story remained basically the same. They capture the dinosaur, they put it in a Wild West show, it breaks free, and complete and total carnage ensues. And who doesn't like a monster movie without complete and total carnage? GWANGI, by the way, is actually Native American for the word lizard. Now, surprisingly, Willis O'Brien was working on this film at RKO Pictures way back as early as like 1942. However, the executives at the time, after having done some of their own research, concluded that in 1942 the public just didn't want to go see pictures about dinosaurs anymore. I mean, really? The greatest monster movie of all time, King Kong, only came out like 10 years earlier, but whatever. So, Willis O'Brien basically said, the heck with it, they don't want dinosaurs? Fine, I'll just go make me another monkey movie. And that, my friends, is exactly how Mighty Joe Young came to be, which is another super cool stop-motion classic. Video on that coming soon. Stay tuned. Well, fast forward to the mid-1960s, and Ray Harryhausen decided to reunite with his old friend and partner, producer Charles Schneer, to take a look at dusting off a couple of those old Willis O'Brien projects. The first of the two was called War Eagles, which was developed for MGM, and the second was, you guessed it, GWANGI.
On the Valley of GWANGI, Charles and I were looking for another subject. I found in my garage the script of GWANGI. It was a script that Willis O'Brien had developed in 1942. And we renamed it The Valley of GWANGI.
Ray Harryhausen was a little bit apprehensive at first about setting this film in the current day of the late 1960s, basically trying to avoid the obvious cliches about a monster being taken down with army tanks and missiles. It was at this point that the producer, Charles Schneer, offered the project first to Columbia, who had made all the other Harryhausen-Schneer films. But they turned it down. It was at this point that Warner Brothers stepped in and agreed to finance the film with James O'Connelly signed up to direct. Now, this film wasn't the last project that Ray Harryhausen ever animated, but it was the very last dinosaur theme filmed that he ever worked on.
I based my GWANGI on Charles R. Knight's concept of a Tyrannosaurus. We called it an Allosaurus occasionally. They were both meat eaters, both tyrants, except one was a little larger than the other.
You know, technically, and if you think about it, and I never really did, this is actually a British film. It was shot completely in Spain by a British director with a British supporting cast, and all the post-production took place in England before released by a U.S. distributor. As far as the soundtrack goes, this is really kind of interesting. The composer, Jerome Moras, reused some of his own music when scoring the film. The opening title theme is exactly the same music as the climactic Blanco Canyon sequence in the 1956 big-budget western The Big Country. Almost an entire year was spent on the special effects for the Valley of Gwangi, with more than 300 Dynamation segments in the film, which was a record at the time for Ray Harryhausen. Dynamation, yeah, that was a technique developed by Ray Harryhausen himself, involving multiple composites of rear projected footage combined with other matte layers painted on glass. Stick them all together in post-production compositing, and there you go. Monsters and Cowboys. One of the most difficult and labor-intensive segments in the entire film, as far as the stop-motion animation was concerned, was the scene with the cowboys roping Gwangi. They literally achieved this by having the actors hold onto ropes that were tied to a stick connected to the back of a Jeep.
It was very tricky, the roping sequence. It required the cowboys throwing lassos over an animated model, which would be shot later after the production. So we had a Jeep portraying a dinosaur, and he was just outside the camera range where the split screen would be. And then later on, the two halves were put together, which blotted out the Jeep. And through intercutting, it gave the illusion that they were roping a dinosaur that was not there.
Damn, gotta love those classic real-world practical special effects. Now, one of the very first stop-motion sequences in the entire film was at the beginning with the diving act with the girl, TJ, and the horse. It was obviously way too risky to have a rider and a horse jump off of a 40-foot high platform into a tank of water, so stop motion to the rescue. I'm pretty sure that back in the day, audiences were left scratching their heads wondering, how did they get that horse to do that? The splash in the tank was real, however, and triggered by an electric charge in the tank. That little Eohippus thing was so cute, and after the local gypsies put the Eohippus back into the Forbidden Valley, most of the scenes were done with stop motion, except for one long shot where they actually used a baby goat because the stop-motion model would just have been too small.
The key pivot point of the whole story was the Eohippus. Obi put him in the original script, and we tried to keep that same character in our version.
The pterosaurs were freaking awesome. They were given bat wings with elongated fingers, sort of looked like the pterosaur from Harryhausen's earlier film, 1 Million Years BC. Gwangi was just super cool, but he wasn't always a 14-inch tall stop-motion puppet. In one scene, for several long shots, the crew built a full-size mock-up of Gwangi, again because the model would just have been far too small to superimpose into the shots. Then there's the scene with the elephant, and Ray Harryhausen originally planned to use a real elephant in some of the scenes where it's fighting with Gwangi. But for obvious reasons, that plan didn't really work out, so we got a pretty cool and fairly accurate-looking stop-motion elephant. This is odd, and I really couldn't find a good explanation for it. But according to the producer Schneer, the director of the film, Jim O'Connelly, suddenly, for some reason, lost all interest in the film right in the middle of shooting. But he did obviously stay on throughout the remainder of the shoot. Where's the director? He's taking a nap. I don't know. James Franciscus. I pretty much love anything that James Franciscus is in, even though, come to think of it, I think the only things I ever saw him in was this and Beneath the Planet of the Apes. But as usual, he's charismatic, always super into his character, and just plain fun to watch. Gila Golan, or Gila Golan, not sure which, who played TJ, the girl with the struggling rodeo show, was cast for some reason by the extreme insistence of Warner Brothers. If you're making this movie, she's got to be in it. I don't know, maybe she was involved with one of them there studio executives. At any rate, her Israeli accent was so thick that they had an uncredited voice actress literally redub every line of hers in the entire film. I wonder if they even told her before the premiere. I hope so. I certainly would not have been wanting to sit next to her if they didn't. This is kind of cool. The actor who played Professor Bromley, Lawrence Nesmith, was the same guy who played the shipbuilder Argos in Jason and the Argonauts. This film was in production for a year and a half, and the dinosaur rope sequence alone took more than 2 months to complete. The finale of the film, where poor old GWANGI meets his fiery fate, was shot at Coenza's Cathedral. And speaking of the end of this film, I honestly have to say, back when I was a kid and still today, I really get upset when I see what happened to GWANGI. I mean, again, like King Kong, these profit-motivated business people drag this unwilling creature into an environment it was never meant to be in. The creature doesn't like it. The creature reacts, and rather than try to find some way to get GWANGI back to his valley, they just burn him to death. But regardless, at least technically speaking, there were a ton of different special effects styles that were used for that final sequence of the film. Not only the obvious stop motion of the dinosaur, but tons of superimposed flames in post-production, and the outside of the church, at least the lower half, was real, but the upper half was a miniature which was matted in during post-production. Well, The Valley of GWANGI hit theaters on June 11th, 1969 in Detroit and September 3rd, 1969 in New York City. Unfortunately, and I'm not really sure why, the management at Warner Brothers changed, and the film hardly got any promotion at all prior to its release. Critically, the New York Times called the film a generally fun, run-of-the-mill monster rally with wonderful special effects, even though poorly marketed. Nope, can't dispute that. Weekly Variety gave the film a horrible review, stating, and I quote, "There is little to recommend in this film. It's a dubious cinematic goulash, which is crude with poor imitations of earlier films." Wow, dude, get a grip. Warner Brothers did re-release the film 2 years later in 1971 on a double bill with When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth. Guess they were just trying to get a little bit more of that money back. However, the people like us who watched it when we were kids consider this movie still sort of a cult classic. Okay, but whatever happened to all those really cool stop-motion Ray Harryhausen miniatures? Well, I'm very happy to say that most of them do still exist. Many, if not all, of these original Ray Harryhausen filming miniatures are currently part of the Ray and Diana Harryhausen Foundation. Unfortunately, and a little regrettably, most of these stop-motion masterpieces have become just too fragile over the years to do any touring or make any public appearances. But we've got the pictures, and we know they still exist. How cool is that? Well, the Valley of GWANGI came and the Valley of GWANGI went, and I think this is the very first time that I really can't go on with that statement, because after it left, nothing else really happened. No attempts whatsoever for a sequel or a remake were ever made or even discussed. The only thing I could find was a Dell movie classic comic book adaptation, which came out in 1969. However, in 2022, Star Ace Toys put out a 12-inch tall GWANGI Allosaurus, which ran about $300 and looked just awesome. But it pretty much seems to be out of stock everywhere that I look. I can't find one. But if any of you guys happen to have an extra one floating around, I'll take it. Yeah, there's a lot of negativity floating around for this classic monster movie, but you know what? Who cares? To me, it's an untouched, classic stop-motion animation monster film from our childhood. It's a cheesy yet fun Saturday afternoon popcorn movie, and I have no problem whatsoever saying that I liked this movie as a kid, and I still do.
It was a pleasure to be able to do something that unfortunately Obi couldn't complete. I think there are people who feel that that's one of our best pictures. I think GWANGI is quite complete in itself. I think that most people who see GWANGI find it very entertaining.
Now, if you haven't seen this movie and you want to, you can find a beautiful remastered copy of The Valley of GWANGI on DVD and Blu-ray, and believe me, the restored film in the high definition looks absolutely gorgeous. At any rate, love it or hate it, The Valley of GWANGI to this day remains, to me at least, not only a perfect representation of classic 1960s monster movies, but also one lone chapter in an amazing catalog of the brilliant Ray Harryhausen stop-motion masterpieces, including Mighty Joe Young, the beast from 20,000 Fathoms, It Came from Beneath the Sea, 20 Million Years to Earth, The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Jason and the Argonauts, and so many more. We could be here all day, but that, my friends, is the topic of another video. I really hope you guys enjoyed that deep dive into the Valley of GWANGI, and if you did and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a whole bunch of new videos coming up really soon that I know you guys are just gonna dig. As always, if anybody has any questions, drop them down in the comments, and I will try my best to answer them for you. And please, feel free to stop back anytime as we continue our conversation on movies, music, and monsters.
Movies, music, and monsters.